the President Emeritus and Historian of the Gettysburg Foundation for our series, Gettysburg on the Road. And I'm very excited to be with Randy Rogers here at the Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. Now, some of you know this is my hometown, and I'm back to point out some great Civil War and Gettysburg connections right here in one of Ohio's most famous cemeteries. Randy is the executive director of the Green Lawn Cemetery Association. And Randy, thanks for coming out here with us.
Sure, thanks for joining us.
And this is home week for me, so I just love it. And by the way, we've got my dad, we've rounded him up, the man that taught me almost everything I know about Civil War on the camera. So thank you, Dad, for being here. Randy, where are we here inside the Green Lawn Cemetery, Columbus? Where are we?
Well, we call this Soldier Circle, and this was the first military section established at Green Lawn. We now have 7 military sections, and just in those 7 sections are over 6,000 veterans. And there are thousands of other veterans buried with their families throughout the grounds. But this is where it started, and during the Civil War, Columbus was a huge hub of activity with a recruiting depot, a supply depot, a prisoner of war camp. So there were Union soldiers who were dying during those activities here in town. And the Cemetery Association established this section for those Union soldiers who died in Columbus during the war. And there are about 500 of them buried here behind us.
Okay, and in this section, there's all kinds of different units related to Ohio in the American Civil War right here where we're standing. Randy, this cemetery is very old. What's the age of Green Lawn Cemetery?
So this is actually our 175th anniversary. We're calling it 175 years of love and remembrance this year. And we were established in 1848 as the Cemetery Association, and in 1849 we had our grand opening here at Green Lawn. And the purpose was to replace older cemeteries that were no longer meeting Columbus's needs with this new type of cemetery, a rural cemetery, which was meant to be a much more park-like. And that's why it's such a beautiful grounds with the 200- and 300-year-old trees and the beautiful markers and the landscape the way it is, because this rural cemetery movement dictated that.
And how big is this cemetery? It's very large. It's a very large cemetery. What's the size of this, and how does that compare with other Ohio cemeteries?
Well, we're the second largest cemetery in Ohio,
wow,
and we've got 325 official acres. You'll see the number 360 floated around.
Okay.
I measured at 325.
325, okay.
But that's
massive. Big. That's big. That's massive, folks.
We're over 160,000 burials here.
Wow.
We still have 70 acres to go, so we're going to be burying people here for another 100 years.
Okay.
And it's really a city of the dead on par with the city it supports at this point. And so it's been a prominent place in Columbus for 175 years.
A lot of years, and there are at least 5 Ohio governors that are buried here. That includes one from the Civil War. Stay tuned for that. And you have Medal of Honor recipients here too. How many Medal of Honor recipients do you have in the cemetery?
We have 5 Medal of Honor recipients also, which for a single cemetery, a non-military cemetery, that's a significant number of Medal of Honor recipients.
And one of these men came from Andrew's Raiders, which are the first men to get the Medal of Honor. Correct. It was established. And so one of these men is the Civil War. Do you just have one Civil War Medal of Honor recipient, or you got more than one?
2.
2. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got there's a lot of history there. The cemetery is open regular hours. If you want to come and visit the cemetery, tell us, help our viewers understand that.
The grounds are open 365 days a year. We only close if there's weather that makes it unsafe. And during the summertime, we're open from 7 to 7, and in the wintertime, we're open from 7 to 5. And our webpage and our Facebook page will tell you what time of year and which schedule we're on.
All right, so you can check the Green Lawn Cemetery website for any further details. Folks, if you're anywhere in the Central Ohio area, if you're passing through the Central Ohio area, and you're interested in finding some famous people from about all periods, by the way, come and visit the Green Lawn Cemetery. We're here today because we're going to do a few Gettysburg connections, and Randy, we can't thank you enough for being with us today to do that. So we're going to head out now, and we're going to visit a few Gettysburg connected graves. So thanks.
Super.
We're now at Section C, Lot 17, and this is sort of an unusual Gettysburg connection that we found here in Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. And it's Samuel Galloway, and it says right on his stone, born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1811. Now, Galloway's got a great history. He came from Gettysburg. I looked it up, Randy, and he's got, there are 10 children in his family, and every one of them are born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Every single one of them. His father, John Galloway, died in Gettysburg, died around the Gettysburg area, and is buried in the Evergreen Cemetery. Died in 1829. That's our local cemetery. Looks like his father, John's body was moved in to the Evergreen Cemetery. Samuel comes out to Ohio. He graduates from Miami University of Ohio, or Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and then he will come to Columbus. He'll be the Secretary of State of the state of Ohio. He'll be a representative there, and Abraham Lincoln actually appoints him as the Judge Advocate General, the Chief Prosecutor, over at Camp Chase, which is a POW mustering camp, very important Civil War facility here in the Columbus, Ohio area. Samuel Galloway from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. You mentioned to me that there's a sort of an unusual burial connected to the Galloway family here.
Right.
So let's walk over here and let's take a look at it.
And I believe this was by marriage to the Galloway family. This William McMillan, who was a surgeon and went on to become the colonel of the 95th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. And he had a notorious reputation during the Civil War. His unit was routed because he was drunk and allegedly cowardly and left the battlefield. And one of the people that were killed during that rout was Oscar Kelton, the Kelton family being a really prominent.
That's a very
Columbus
prominent family here in Columbus. Very. Yeah.
And so Oscar Kelton was buried on the battlefield, and then the next year his father took a buggy and was bringing the son back to Columbus when there was a buggy accident and he was killed.
Holy cow.
And so one of the many ghost stories of the Kelton house is that it's Oscar's father who haunts the house because he's upset over William McMillan getting his son killed.
Oh.
And later on in the war, McMillan had an opportunity to redeem himself, and he kind of overdid it with a lot of bravado and was again apparently drunk. And they captured a Confederate officer, and he took the Confederate officer's sword and then proceeded to beat the unarmed man about the head and shoulders with it, causing a lifelong brain impediment, and the guy was crippled for the rest of his life.
Holy cow.
And so he became a somewhat notorious figure of the Civil War, an epitome of what not to do as a leader.
So William McMillan, 95th Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment, not a Gettysburg regiment, but in the plot of Samuel Galloway, born in Gettysburg, moved to Ohio, became a pretty important representative here, and then the Judge Advocate General, and now the grave of William McMillan, 95th Ohio, Brevet Major General of the United States, Colonel, dying in 1902 in the cemetery. So, all right, we're on to the next one. We're at the grave in Green Lawn Cemetery, Columbus, Ohio, William Dennison Jr., one of the governors buried here. 5 governors, right? Five governors buried in Green Lawn Cemetery. With Randy here, of the Executive Director of Green Lawn Cemetery, and we stopped at Governor Dennison's grave. And Randy, I love to talk about Governor Dennison because he's got a funny story connected to Gettysburg. We're doing Gettysburg connections for Gettysburg on the Road for the Gettysburg Foundation. And Governor Dennison, born in 1815, he's down in Cincinnati, moved to Columbus in the 1840s, was a Whig candidate, and in 1859, he is elected as a candidate, as the 24th governor. He's elected as 24th governor of the state of Ohio. Camp Dennison in Cincinnati, very big Civil War training camp, is named for him, and he was a very progressive governor at that period of time. He was not renominated nor reelected for 1862, and Governor David Todd becomes the governor of the state of Ohio. But these men are men friendly to Lincoln. The good thing about the state of Ohio, very important state at the time of the Civil War, and there's a great story. Governor Dennison is one of 3 governors that travels to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania for the Gettysburg Address on November 19, 1863. And it's one of those stories that if it isn't true, Randy, it ought to be true. The governors, or Abraham Lincoln comes off of the platform, and he is introduced to Governor Dennison the current governor, Governor Todd, and the governor-elect, Governor Brow, I think is how you pronounce his name. All three of Ohio's governors, because they had 2 terms back, or 2-year terms back at the time of the Civil War. And Lincoln reportedly said, how many governors can Ohio possibly have? And so President Lincoln meeting William Dennison in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the day of the Gettysburg Address, November 19, 1863. And Dennison, after he goes out of being governor, he's still very active in politics. He actually becomes the chairman of the Republican National Committee, which meets in Baltimore in 1864, and he dies in 1882, buried here, Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. So Governor William Dennison, a Gettysburg connection that few people know. Thank you. At the grave of Colonel Orland Smith of Gettysburg fame here at Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. Colonel Smith has a great history. He's actually born in the state of Maine on May 2nd, 1825, which makes him 38 years old here during the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. And he starts a railroad career after a pretty common school education up in Maine in 1849. And in 1853, he gets a job on the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad, and he moves down to the Ohio River here at the Buckeye State in 1853. Then in 1858, he moves to Chillicothe, Ohio, and he becomes the colonel in 1861 at the beginning of the Civil War of the 73rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment. He is at McDowell, he's at Cross Keys, he's at Chancellorsville, he's in a number of battles in the Civil War, and at the Battle of Gettysburg, he will command the 2nd Brigade of the 2nd Division of the 11th Army Corps. For all of you viewers that come to the Gettysburg battlefield, this is right at the intersection of the Taneytown Road and the Emmitsburg Road on Cemetery Hill at Steinwehr Avenue. You're driving down Steinwehr Avenue. General Adolph von Steinwehr was the division commander, and Colonel Smith here in the Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, buried today, was the brigade commander on Cemetery Hill during the Battle of Gettysburg as a colonel, and the 73rd Ohio, commanded by someone else, is actually under his command during the battle. Now, he resigns out of the service in 1864. He goes back to being a railroad executive, and his wife dies at a pretty young age. She dies down in Baltimore, but she's buried here in Green Lawn. So when Colonel Smith dies in 1903, dies on October 3rd, 1903, he's buried here in Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, and he had no children that survived him. Now, I'm pulling his will, Randy, and one of the things in the will is it says that he has a beautiful ornate sword presented to him, made at the Tiffany Company in 1863. It's given to him right after the Battle of Gettysburg, and he bequeaths that sword in his will, which is probated in Chicago, to his niece, his wife's niece, Caroline Wild. And so I'd love to know, the viewers need to track this sword down. I don't know where it is, but I'd love to know where it is. Now, Randy, the cemetery just recently got like a new plaque for Colonel Smith on his stone.
Yes. So
why don't you tell us a little bit about that, now that we've given the history of it?
Well, obviously he has a beautiful family marker and a nice grave marker, but there's nothing here that denotes his Civil War service.
Military service, yeah.
So the Sons of Union Veterans donated this bronze plaque, and now we have that history of his military service is recorded here on the lot as well. And people see this and they realize he must have been someone important, but this explains why.
So Colonel Orland Smith, commander of the 2nd Brigade, 2nd Division, 11th Army Corps, very important Civil War officer in the Battle of Gettysburg, commanding a place that many of you drive by when you visit the Gettysburg battlefield all the time. Randy, thanks. Our last stop here in Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio, is at the foot of the grave of Colonel Eugene Pal of the 66th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. And Colonel Pal fought with the 12th Corps over at Culp's Hill on the Union right on July 2nd and 3rd, actually the 3rd, more active in 1863. And they had a critical role here in the Battle of Gettysburg, Randy. They actually went out on the side of the Confederates, fired in the side of the Confederate line, and the 66th Ohio was pretty instrumental on the morning of July 3rd, 1863, repulsing the Confederates. Colonel Powell comes from Welsh ancestry. He's born in 1834 up in Delaware, Ohio, which is just north of where we're at. And he, at the outbreak of the American Civil War, when the Civil War breaks out, he becomes an officer in the 4th Ohio Infantry Regiment, and then becomes the major of the 66th Ohio Volunteer Infantry Regiment. To at least 2 of the companies of the 66th came from Delaware, Ohio, and his brother Eugene Pal is also a member of this regiment. So when Colonel Pal dies in 1907, he's buried here in the Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio, but an instrumental commander in the Battle of Gettysburg at Culp's Hill on the Federal right for the morning of the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg. So we're at the grave of Eugene Pal. Once again, at our last stop here for our Gettysburg connections, here at Green Lawn Cemetery in Columbus. And let us just say, we want to appreciate you, Randy, for helping us out, for coming out. The folks here at Green Lawn Cemetery, they've been wonderful, and we really appreciate your time out here today. We really appreciate it. Thanks for the history. A lot of great history here at this cemetery as well. So look up Green Lawn Cemetery when you are on the internet. On behalf of the Gettysburg Foundation, the National Park Service's partner, we just appreciate if you'll follow us on social media. There's a little button down at the bottom of the right-hand screen. Run your cursor over, press it, subscribe, and follow us for more great historical content for the Gettysburg Foundation on behalf of the Gettysburg National Military Park. And I want to thank my dad behind the camera. Appreciate it very much. All right, thank you.